fraud that was outlined in the petition that was not allowed to go into the court. The petition was not brought to the floor, and as a result, Tina Peters was unlawfully imprisoned. My father, Dale Richardson, was actually tortured in the state of Colorado to suppress his evidence of treason against the United States, which was based on improper engineering controls which allowed for the spread of the COVID-19 virus, which was likewise created at Wuhan by Peter Daszak and the EcoHealth Alliance with the pathogen, which were handed over to the Chinese by the Winnipeg Biolabs. This created the circumstances for widespread election fraud. My father Dale and I are friends of Tina Peters, who has been politically persecuted for standing up for the liberty of all Americans. And she, as a sister in Christ, has been persecuted like I have for standing up for the liberty of all people. In the state of Colorado, women and Christians are being persecuted on monumental levels, and I'm calling for everyone to stand up for Tina Peters in every way possible, including using the Karis Project action plan to compel the state government to put the petition for redress of grievance to the floor so that Tina Peters can petition before the state house that belongs to the people. And if Colorado continues to deny a Republican form of government, we will implore that Congress and President Donald J. Trump initiate Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution, which guarantees a Republican form of government, to the states, and use that just power to intervene and provide what the Constitution has ordained. The time is upon us to come together and stand united as people, and let the world know that we stand together to preserve this perfect union for all Americans and our posterity. That is why, y'all already know, I'm going to leave you with my favorite quote. The greatest want of the world is the want of men. Men who cannot be bought or sold. Men who in their inmost souls are true and honest. Men who do not fear to call sin by its right name. Men whose conscience is as true to duty as needle to the pole. Men who will stand for the right, though the heavens may fall. Ciao, guys.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Karis Project podcast. Today we have with us John Goodman, who is returning guest, and he is going to talk to us a little bit more about the election fraud and the mail-in ballots. So if you want to kind of reintroduce yourselves to our audience, John.
Well, thank you very much, Dale. It's great to be back on your show. I'm John Goodman. I'm a member of the Florida Election Integrity Committee, and my responsibility with that committee has been to try to find a solution to these rigged elections. And as I've been delving deeper into it, we know that the biggest culprit of rigged elections is the fraudulent votes that come in by mail. And I want to take just a minute, Dale, and I want to explain to the viewers, because there seems to be some confusion between the difference between absentee voting, and mail-in ballots. There's a huge difference. Absentee ballots is what we have used since 1775, right up until the pandemic. And the purpose of absentee ballots was for individuals that could legitimately not make it to the polling station, such as overseas military, such as you're in hospice, you're hospitalized, you're in a nursing home, you're mentally retarded, you're an amputee. There was about 20 to 25 different criteria where you could legally vote by mail. Well, in 2020, because of the pandemic, everyone had to vote by mail. And by the way, there's no such thing as mail-in ballots. The word mail-in ballots is simply a sexy name that was given to the way we were forced to vote in 2020. There is nothing in any law that mentions the word mail-in ballots. And it should have been switched back to absentee vote, Dale, quite frankly, after the pandemic was over. But why didn't Joe Biden switch it back to a 250-year-old voting system? Well, it's a pretty obvious answer, because he wanted illegals to vote. And there's no question about it. And the open borders housing the illegals in hotels with free food and medical care? You don't think they signed a ballot voting for Democrats somewhere along the line there? Hell yeah, they did. They were just grateful to be in a nice hotel with food and medical care, because where they came from, obviously the conditions would have been not as good as that. So he didn't switch it back. And somehow national vote by mail is still embedded in our voting system.
Actually, I'll go ahead and say this even before that. It should have never been changed to start with, because you cannot I've never read in the Constitution that says you can abrogate the constitutional processes in a pandemic. I've just didn't see that anywhere. Right? So
It's true.
they justified these changes by unconstitutional measures, and they should have been removed. They shouldn't have been implemented to begin with, and they should have been removed right off the bat. Right? You can't.
That's true. And actually, you know, the 2020 100% vote by mail, it was marketed by both Democrats and Republicans as a one-time deal. I can show you a video right now of Democrat Speaker of the House at the time, Nancy Pelosi, in September of 2020, saying, quote, "We have to do this one time because of the pandemic." Well, it hasn't been one time, and because the Democrats realized that mail-in ballots are easily weaponized, and they used it to rig the election in 2020. That's for another day, but we have proof now that that election was rigged. So anyway, since that has happened, my focus on the Florida election integrity team has been to find a way to get absentee ballot back in the way the law says, that we've used since the start of the Revolutionary War, since 1775, Dale, and get rid of what's not in the law, which is 100% vote by mail for any Tom, Dick, or Harry that wants to do it. And where the states went awry was when they opened up their states to anybody could vote by mail, that did away with absentee voting. In other words, why would you need absentee voting, which has that parameters for what makes you eligible? But when you opened it up to everyone, there were no parameters. So there was no need for absentee ballot, absentee voting. It doesn't exist anymore. So the states not only got crazy with the cheat, but they also changed our 200-year-old voting system by eliminating absentee ballot. That is absolutely unbelievable.
Well, what they did was they just usurped power that they did not have. That's straight out what happened. There's no justification for it. There's no point in dancing around the words. There was no provision in the Constitution for them to make that one-time exception for COVID. They just scared people into thinking that they could do that, overrided their judgment and their reason, but you can't do that. And these people were the ones that were tasked to safeguard the liberty, and they violated it, and they used people to do that. There was no.
Well, you're right. There's nothing in the Constitution about that. You're absolutely right. But one sticking point is this. I'd go to the states and I'd say, you had no right to open up mail voting to everyone in your state, whether they qualify to vote by absentee vote or not. And you know what they say? The Constitution says that we have primarily 100% power over elections. And it does say that. But where things changed, and Dale, you're aware of this, I spent over 2 months going to the library, reading the Constitution. I don't mean a typed copy online. I mean microfilm, like the real Constitution. I went through a bottle of Aleve trying to read this, because in the Constitution, most of our viewers probably haven't read the original Constitution. They've read typed copies of it. Some of the writing is big, some is small, some is in cursive, some is on slanted, some is straight, some is in italics, some lines bleed over onto others. The paper is like a faded brownish.
Yes.
It was a very
It's
tough read.
like almost like a
Parchment paper.
parchment.
Yeah, exactly. Well, anyway, around the 7th week, I came across this little codicil, this little small codicil. And this codicil said that although the states do have primary 100% control over elections, that if the states take any actions that, quote, dictate electoral outcomes unfairly, the state's 100% power is revoked and Congress is to step in and fix. So, all these years, Dale, me included, your viewers probably included, we thought that we were helpless to stop the states even when they were cheating, because the Constitution does say that they have primarily 100% power. But now we know about this codicil that I found, and it has changed everything. The states do not have 100% power. It's the biggest myth.
But this is why people need to go back, read the Federalist Papers, go back and look at the way the Constitution was constructed. I looked at the Constitution; I could figure this out by looking at it, and I saw that what they said agreed with it. The Constitution is written in a manner that each portion it's about not about interpretation. Each portion is a um, set portion that all fits together, that it works as a part of, think of a machine, and you have a bunch of gears moving in that machine. Each one of those things are precise and has to function exactly as it was intended, because if the gear's too big, it doesn't work. If it's too small, it's not going to work, right? Like if you have
That's
things
right.
that they're not perfectly lined up, you're going to start having them smacking against each other. The teeth are going to shear off. The thing is going to fly apart. This is the way the Constitution is constructed, and each part is interdependent on the other part working. When you take a section and pull it out of harmony, then the whole thing begins to fall apart, and this is what we're seeing. So it's an integrated whole that needs to be worked at, and then you have to understand that when the Constitution was designed to protect the republic, not to obliterate it. So when you sit down and understand that the state constitutions are a reflection of the United States Constitution that all the states agreed upon, and then you have to guarantee that every state has a Republican form of government, you cannot usurp any authority that will take away their union that the states all agreed on. That's just nonsense and rubbish, right? So I agree with what you're saying, right? And when you understand the way the Constitution works, when the states are like, no, we have complete power, we can do whatever we want, that's not the way it works. Not the way.
But the country, for many, many, many decades, we've been under the impression because in the Constitution, by the way, the Constitution is much longer than people think. It's not just about voting. It's about government's responsibilities, the citizens' rights. It talks about slavery. It talks about a whole host of different things. So the Constitution is much longer than the average American thinks it is, because when you see it online, it's just, an 8.5 by 11 crammed up in. It's very long, actually. And yes, Dale, you're 100% right. And the reason why I went through the Constitution through microfilm, the original Constitution, is because I could not wrap my arms around the fact that the framers would give the states 100% power with no oversight. Even in the 1700s, the word cheat was still, people cheated in the 1700s. Maybe not in elections, but they cheated. So I figured there had to be some kind of oversight mechanism. And as we now know, there is. And so that's something that is 99% of the country thinks that the states are untouchable with elections. So I want you to take away from the show that there is a clause, a codicil, call it what you want. And it's very small, and I can see how it might have gone unnoticed because the line above it bleeds into it. And But on the other hand, the Constitution was written in 1788 and it was ratified in 1789. So it's hard to believe that even though it was a hard little small codicil to notice, but after all those years, you would think that one of these constitutional scholars would have noticed it. So what happened was at that point, I decided, look, we've got to get absentee ballot back in, and we've got to get national vote by mail out. And I'll tell you why. With absentee ballot, it averages 6 to 8 million votes that are in the mail, going to nursing homes, elderly, hospice. But when it's national, anybody can vote by mail. You can be 25 years old and a fitness expert, and you can vote by mail too.
Yes.
There's over 50 million ballots floating around in the mail, not knowing where they're ending up, not knowing whose mailbox was robbed, not knowing who's using them, not knowing who has that $12,000 laser printer that is so good, and they sell them, that it is down to the millimeter on how wide the tip of the pen was where you voted. So they're easily fraudable. And because we have almost 60 million of them floating around aimlessly in the country, it's like saying, hey, fraud, come on, fraud.
Yes.
But with absentee ballot, it's a fraction of those number of ballots in the mail. And so it's like 2 + 2 = 4. The less ballots in the mail, the less fraud. And that is what we are attempting to do.
Yeah.
And go ahead, Dale.
Say, let's just start pulling up some of the stuff that you found.
That's right. And we have some huge breaking news that is going to blow the socks off of your viewers. We will get to that, and they're going to be very pleased. So we've got some things to show you here, and they may not be in any particular order, but they're all related to election integrity. So let's go to number 1, and that's where we are right now. And this is the Supreme Court's judgment as far as the state's power is concerned. This is from 1995. Okay? There was a challenge to the Supreme Court in 1995 on term limits. The states wanted no term limits. The challenge from the groups that were challenging wanted term limits. Well, the bottom line is it ended up that the Supreme Court ruled for the states as far as the term limit part, but in their written decision, they went on to say this. Listen very closely. This is the Supreme Court talking about what the states can and cannot do as far as elections are concerned. They went on to say, the court has upheld a variety of state laws designed to ensure that elections are fair and honest and orderly. But the court went on to say this: if the states go beyond, quote, protection of the integrity and regularity of the election process, and instead operate to disadvantage a particular class of candidates or negate the need for a general election, then Congress must step in and fix, which is exactly what the codicil says. So when I say no one in the world knew about the codicil, the Supreme Court knew about the codicil, and they should. Who else should know the Constitution better than justices on the Supreme Court, right? So even the Supreme Court is saying in 1995, yes, states, you do have 100% power, but once you abuse it, it's over. The next slide, what you're looking at, is Donald Trump speaking to the Constitution Accountability Center. And this is in August 13th of 2024. And he, even there, is very concerned about this national vote by mail where anybody can get votes, ballot harvest, fraud. And he goes and he says in this exact quote, he was doing an interview, he said, absentee ballots, by the way, are fine. Well, I'm quoting Trump here. Absentee ballots, by the way, are fine. But the universal mail-ins that are just sent all over the place where people can grab them and grab stacks of them and sign them and do whatever you want. That's the thing we're against, unquote. That's what that says right there. So Donald Trump foresaw that this national vote by mail was going to become a big problem as far as election integrity for our country. And there he is right there in August 13th, 2024, saying, we can't keep doing this. This is a big problem. So that's Donald Trump there. Let's go on to the next picture for our great viewing audience, if we could, Dale.
Yep, we're there.
All right. Now, this is really, really interesting. In that same written decision that I told you about the term limits, this was part 2 of it. They really read the states the Riot Act about abusing elections. This is also part of that 1995 term limits decision. Term limits versus Thornton was the name of the case. Term limits versus Thornton, if anyone wants to look it up. And it says, the Supreme Court says the framers understood the elections clause. That's what they're calling that codicil that I found, okay? They're calling it the elections clause. No one's ever heard of that until now, the elections clause. So the Supreme Court is saying the framers understood the elections clause as a grant of authority to issue procedural regulations and not as a source of power to dictate electoral outcomes to favor or disfavor a class of candidates or to invade important constitutional restraints. Now, the key about this is, remember I told you in the codicil it says that the framers said that the states cannot do anything that dictates electoral outcomes unfairly. Well, here in this 1995 decision, I just read to you, they said the states cannot use their power as a source of power to dictate electoral outcomes. So the Supreme Court used the word dictate the same as they used in the Constitution. So that's why I believe that the Supreme Court knew about this codicil, because they even used the word dictate in their written decision, which is exactly the verbiage that the Founding Fathers used in the Constitution. So you're getting the point so far. The states, the biggest myth we've ever had when it comes to voting was the states were untouchable. It's not true. I believed it. Everyone believed it. Yeah.
This is why people have to understand, for lack of a better term, because a lot of people are Christian, is understanding the difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. You see, the letter of the law tries to define it just on whatever words you're saying, but the spirit of the law is understanding how to apply the principles, and the same type of idea has to apply to the Constitution. When you understand how it works, then you can then properly apply it to any situation. And this is right where people are getting too hung up on the words, but that's not the way that the founders did that, because they were all men that had just finished kicking the snot out of the British to get their freedom. And they designed this to ensure that all of the abuses that happened before didn't happen again. And it was designed so that you could apply the principle of the Constitution to any situation. Because if they had to write out every single scenario, they'd be still writing the Constitution till this day, right? So what they did was they gave us a framework. They gave the people a framework and said, using this framework, you can apply it. When you understand it, you can apply it to other situations. And this is the way that it's designed to work. And then you have the Declaration of Independence as the rights that are protected, and showed the things that went wrong and why you guys have the Constitution. And then you use that, and then you have the law as a layer of that, and then you look at the decision so it lines up with all three, and then you've applied it correctly.
That's exactly what the framers were doing. Exactly what the framers were doing. Obviously, the terminology back in those days was not as professional as what you just said, but the meaning of what you just said is exactly what was the framers on their mind when they were developing this. Exactly right, Dale. So I decided I was going to try to get Donald Trump a solution to this. And I came up with several options where we could get back to absentee ballot and do away with national vote by mail, where every Tom, Dick, and Harry in the country can get a vote by mail. And I want to thank, number one, Mike Lindell, Steve Bannon, his daughter Maureen Bannon, because without them, my materials would have never made it to the West Wing. And I want to tell you a couple of the options that I had given President Trump before we go on to the next slide, Dale. First of all, one of the options was the fact that absentee ballot has been used and part of our voting system since 1775. So he didn't need congressional approval to bring back a law that's already a law. That was one of the solutions that I had, which may or may not have worked, probably would have. I mean, is the Supreme Court going to overrule something that's part of our voting system for 251 years? I don't think so. That was one option. Another option for Donald Trump was the codicil that I found, where in reality, the ironic part is that codicil that says the states don't have 100% power if they cheat. That would have actually been Donald Trump's best defense after he was in court after the 2020 election, but nobody knew about it. In other words, he went to court, Donald Trump, and said, the numbers don't look right. It was rigged. And it was, but you still have to have something tangible in your hand. And if he had had that codicil in his hand, showing that the states overstepped and violated the Constitution, maybe, we'll never know for sure, but maybe the certification would have been put on hold while they investigated. Maybe, we don't know. But nevertheless, it would have been nice if we, me, you, Donald Trump, had known about the codicil that contradicts the myth that the states can do whatever the heck they want. Cheat, doesn't matter. Because you go to them and they say, oh, the Constitution says we've got all the power. Well, you don't. You don't. And we're gradually getting the word out. And we're starting right here on the Karis Project, giving you information that is not public information. And by the way, I just want to tell you one of the reasons why I'm breaking all this news, and there's big news that I haven't even broken yet. We're going to get to it. I don't go on a lot of podcasts. I turn down a lot of requests for podcasts. Dale and the Karis Project was one of the first podcasts I ever went on. And Dale has been with me every step of the way. And this is a quality show that only delivers facts. And so when I got permission to bring this publicly, I said, I'm going to do it on the Karis Project because Dale gave me the bully pulpit when this was first starting. So that's why what you're hearing now for the first time is being heard on this show. Okay?
Right.
So I just want to make that clear.
Right before you get to
Don't blush. Don't blush.
Let's hear from Mike Lindell, and we'll take a short commercial break.
So Mike Lindell took my things. Mike Lindell took my 3 or 4 options to the West Wing.
Yes.
And
I got to take a short commercial break. We're going to just...
and then we'll come back. Sure, absolutely.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to announce the next generation of energy drinks, Rev 7. It has no sugar and no caffeine. Instead, Rev 7 uses Go BHB. Go BHB is one of the body's primary ketones, and it provides the most efficient and clean fuel that your body needs. It also helps you stay energized all day with no crashes. Not only that, it produces 3 times more brain energy than sugar, which helps boost your memory, focus, and mental sharpness. It also helps reduce stress and helps balance your mood. Rev 7 does all that while being the best tasting energy drink ever. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 20% today. I'm so sure you're going to love Rev 7. For a limited time, you get our introductory 3-pack absolutely free. I drink Rev 7 every day and I absolutely love it, and so will you.
Yeah, so for anybody who needs any MyPillow products, go to mypillow.com/the Karis Project or call 800-845-2942. Use the promo code Karis. I mean, they got lots of good stuff. Obviously, the energy drinks, they got the pillows, they got the bed stuff, the sheets, the beds.
Listen, I guarantee you, Mike Lindell, that's not a bogus commercial. He must drink Rev 7 because Mike Lindell has unstoppable energy. Unstoppable energy. So I believe he's not just promoting Rev 7. I believe he's drinking them too. And they must work because he is relentless and high energy all the time. So speaking of Mike Lindell, he and Steve Bannon, Maureen Bannon, they've been great. My information would have never made it to the West Wing without them. Okay, so yeah, that's where we are right there. Exactly. So he took it to the West Wing, Mike Lindell, on Thursday, July 3rd. And he gave my information to White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. And he also gave it to Will Scharf. For those who don't know who Will Scharf is, if you've ever watched one of President Trump's, when he's at the Oval Office desk signing executive orders and you've got the media also asking questions, it's sort of a combination press conference executive order. We've all seen that. The gentleman standing up next to President Trump that's handing him the folder saying, Mr. President, this executive order deals with the Teamsters Union's request to da-da-da. That's Will Scharf that hands him the folder and gives him a synopsis of what is the executive order that he is being handed. And so Mike Lindell took it to him and Susie Wiles. And then somebody must have leaked something because this article from the New York Times, which, by the way, is no friend of Donald Trump, comes out the day after. The DOJ is going to start charging election officials who violate election laws. You know, one of the problems why election fraud continues is because no one is being punished. And so I'd like to think that this came out based on my material. I don't know, and it really doesn't matter. What does matter is that now, if you are an election official, you better think twice before the cheat because you might find yourself in jail. And I'll give you an example. Let's say we go back to absentee ballot and your state has 70,000 people eligible for an absentee ballot, but yet your state sends out 300,000 because they want to pad the vote for Democrats. You see, that would be definitely a chargeable offense. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that blue states will do that, right? Okay. This is the executive order that Donald Trump did in 2018 that we were talking about. That was one of the options that I presented to him in the packet that Mike Lindell took to the West Wing. And what's really cool about this is that he refers to the actual executive order that he did in 2018. So bottom line is, this is the executive order that he did in 2018. And what it says is that the president of the United States, not just him, but future presidents, can interject themselves into the election, but only if there is conclusive proof of interference from a foreign country or foreign entity. That is what the, yeah.
I know. I've cited
Huh?
this. I've cited this executive order numerously because this is one of the things where when you looked at the way that COVID was implemented and rolled out, it constituted foreign interference. There's a whole lot of people because it was used to justify all of those unconstitutional changes where everybody believed that the states were supreme when they were not, where they had to do it in accordance with preserving the union, which what they were doing was absolutely not going to do that. And you brought up the actual section that articulates that and so forth. And it's also implied in Article 4, Section 4, that guarantees a Republican form of government, and cheating in elections is definitely not going to guarantee that. But yes, this is something that people should be very well familiar with.
And I knew you knew about it because the COVID was election interference. It was not the same type, but it was still as absentee, as national vote by mail fraud, but it was still election interference. So one of my recommendations of President Trump was to use his own executive order right here, which was upheld 5-4 by the Supreme Court. It was challenged. Everything Donald Trump does is challenged, even if it's constitutional. The Democrats just automatically challenge it just because they hate Donald Trump, even if it's already constitutionally legal, and they know it is, they still challenge it just to put him through the ringer. But anyway, this was upheld, which means it's law. And so that was another recommendation, to use this along with the fact that recently we have gotten proof from the FBI and Kash Patel and John Solomon from Just the News, who does not print anything until it's quadruple checked. That's why he's credible. He does not do conspiracy theories, and he will not print it even with one source. There has to be multiple. So this, which says the president can interject in elections if there's foreign interference, and now we have proof that China did tamper in our 2020 election. And let me tell you how they tampered with it. They made 800,000 fake IDs, and they sent them to Chinese nationals that were here in the United States. Now, I want to be honest, as always, those Chinese nationals were allowed to be here on visas, but they weren't allowed to vote. They were legally in the country, but they weren't allowed to vote. But China knew that it was all by mail. So they knew if they could get fake IDs to these Chinese nationals, chances are their votes would slide through and be counted. And they were. And they were. So Donald Trump and all presidents, the two biggest, broadest powers that the president has is, number one, pardons. How do you think Joe Biden's getting away with these 10-year pardons for people? People are pardoned for crimes we don't even know about yet, like his family, like Hunter, like Liz Cheney, like Dr. Fauci, So how did he get away with that? It's a stretch, and I still think it may be illegal. We'll have another show about that. But pardons has broad powers for the president, and the other area is national security. And I would say China, with 800,000 fake IDs, and they vote with them here in the United States, no way. That is definitely a national security issue. Yes. So between that and his own executive order, that was an option. So let's go. We're on the next one right now, right?
Yes.
So the next one here, this is the one that talks about, it's just an extension of the executive order saying that any undermining of the elections by foreign countries, it's just an extension of his executive order. Let's go to the next one, Dale.
Okay.
Again, it's just a continuation of that. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay. All right, so this one here, again, it is Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution explains how the states have the primary authority over election administration, times, places, manner of holding elections. Conversely, the Constitution grants the Congress a purely secondary role to alter and create election laws only in extreme cases. Invasion, legislative neglect. Well, you know what? Didn't they try to take Donald Trump off the ballot in 5 or 6 states for the 2024 election with no cause?
Yes.
That's real big legislation neglect. Actually, that was overturned by the Supreme Court 9-0. How often do you see the Supreme Court rule on anything? 9-0. That's how egregious it was. That even
Yes.
Obama appointed judges were saying, no, you can't take Trump off the ballot. That's too much. Even Democrat appointed, or judges appointed by Democrat, Obama judges, Sotomayor, Kagan, they all said, no, you can't take Trump off the ballot. And again, they don't love Donald Trump. So the bottom line is Article 1, Section 4, another example of how Congress can step in when the states abuse. Why this has never come up before I found it in the Constitution is mind-blowing. And I've talked to several constitutional scholars who did not know about what the Supreme Court calls the Elections Clause. It doesn't say the Elections Clause in the actual Constitution, but that's what the Supreme Court calls it. And the states are out of hand, and we are just showing your viewers that there's a way to remedy this.
Well,
let's go on to the next slide. If you don't have any comments.
Yeah, I just want to say quickly that the legislative neglect is what they did during COVID. They went ahead and by decree, rather than using the constitutionally provided legislative procedures to make changes to the elections, they just went ahead and bypassed that. That was straight legislative neglect.
It's true. They could have stepped in and they could have postponed the elections until the pandemic was over. There were lots of things they could have done, but you're right, Dale. The bottom line is it was legislative neglect because they ran a shabby election and Congress had every right to step in and stop it and didn't. You're right.
Well, and China was involved in making sure that that was an election that went sideways because they benefited far more from having Biden in there than they did with Trump. Just it is what it is.
Well, it is because, look, I mean, I support Donald Trump, but I am not a Trumpster. I'm not like, slobbering at the mouth. I support him very strongly, but, I'm not a Trumpster. But the bottom line is, he has rights as a American citizen too, just not as a president. He has rights as an American citizen. Here is what we were just talking about. This is John Solomon's report after he had met with Kash Patel at the FBI. And Kash Patel has arrested 1,200 Chinese nationals and has over 800 of those fake IDs at the FBI now. So if anyone thinks, conspiracy theory, well, number one, it's not a conspiracy theory when John Solomon's involved because he is as conservative of a writer as it is. He will not do anything until you prove it 10 times over. But the other thing is Kash Patel, our FBI director, has the arrests and has plenty of the fake IDs that China used. And you are right what you said a moment ago, Dale. The reason why China went to such extremes in 2020 is because no one is tougher on China than Donald Trump with the tariffs, with holding them accountable. And they didn't want him in there because when Obama, Biden, and past presidents before them, China was able to run ramshot, free hand, do whatever they want. And there was no American president with the backbone to check them and say, no, you're not going to do it. So Trump does. And that's why they did everything they could to keep him out. All right. The next one is, again, let's go to the MIT Election Data Science Lab. Let's go to the next one. There we go. Now, this is very interesting because they did a study on national vote by mail and does it really hurt elections or not? Well, this was the conclusion of the Election Science Lab. And what they found out was, they say another question surrounding vote by mail is whether it increases voter fraud. Two major features of vote by mail raise these concerns. First, the ballot is cast outside of the public eye. That's number one. Now, people break rules all the time, not just on voting, but on anything in life. Think about it. Are people more likely to break a rule when no one's around? Or are you going to break a rule when there's a lot of people around? Well, the answer is obvious. People that cheat and break rules like it better when there's nobody around as a witness. So that is one of the things that the science lab noted, is that the problem with vote by mail is there's no oversight, there's no one around, and that makes people have a better chance of doing something nefarious. And the opportunities for coercion and voter impersonation are also greater with vote by mail. And the second thing is the transmission path of these vote by mail ballots is not as secure as traditional in-person ballots. And these security concerns relate both to ballots being intercepted and ballots being requested without the voter's permission. How about that? So there's even studies that show. This right here was what we were talking about earlier. Donald Trump already sounding the alarm bells about absentee ballots. You can see very clearly there that he is fine with absentee ballots, but the universal mail-in ballots, when he says universal, that means nationwide. Okay, right? Nationwide mail-in ballots that are sent all over the place, where people can grab them and grab stacks of them, sign them, do whatever you want with them. That's what he's against. So there we go. This is something that, Dale, you've seen before, and I want our viewers to take a really close look at this. This is very important. This is the absentee voting law since the pandemic, like right now, post-COVID, right now. And you can see that only 13 states, the states in gray, only 13 states went back to the law after COVID was over, mostly red states in the South. Look at those red states. There's 8 of them. Can you believe in the 2024 election, there were actually 8 states where there were no voting stations? You could only vote by mail. No matter if you were young, old, disabled, a triathlon winner, it didn't matter. If you didn't vote by mail, nada, you didn't vote at all. Now I want your viewers just to think for just a minute. What happens if that 8 states in red that was 100% vote by mail? If we don't stop it now, that red could be 15 states in the next cycle. 2 cycles from now, it could be 25 states. And before we know it, 75% of the country is going to be 100% vote by mail. Oh my God. You know, if that happens, we will never, ever really know who actually won and who actually lost an election. And so only 13 states went back to the law. The other 37 kept it wide open, fraud central, with 8 of those 37 saying, if you don't vote by mail, you can't vote. If you want to vote live in those 8 states, tough noogies. Vote by mail or you don't vote. We can't allow that. I mean, that is absolutely ridiculous. And the founding fathers didn't know anything about vote by mail, but we know based on what they did do in the Constitution that they would not have approved of that. Everyone knows that.
So we need to start wrapping up here real quick. So you want to just...
We will. So let me get to the crux of the problem. or,
Yeah.
or go to the big news then. Yeah, let me get to the breaking news.
Yeah.
As I told you, I came on this show with this news because Dale's been with me since day one on this. And there was many times where I would bang my head against the wall and say, I don't know how we're going to fix this because the Constitution says that the states have the power. And so I don't know how we're going to get them to undo the cheat. And that's where the codicil. And then once that happened, things started happening. So here's the deal. I can 100%, 100% confirm to all your viewers right now that as we speak, the White House is drafting an executive order concerning election integrity. I can promise you that it is happening. You have my word. And those who follow me know that everything I say is true, or why else would I even come on any show or waste my time filming an episode? Wouldn't be worth my time to do it. Wouldn't be worth your time to watch it, right? So that's the breaking news. Nobody knows about this unless you're watching the Karis Project right now, because I have only been aware of this myself for a very short time. And I actually had to get permission from someone higher than me to be able to do what I'm doing right now. But I picked the Karis Project because that's the show, and Dale Richardson and his daughter Kaysha, who's a wonderful lady, have been with me since day one. So I promise your viewers without a shadow of a doubt that sometime in September, I found that out also this morning, sometime in September, you are going to see an election integrity executive order. We don't know what's in it. I am going to guess and hope that we're going to be going back to absentee ballot and not nationwide mail-in ballot. Look, if you don't qualify for absentee ballot and vote by mail, then you go vote in person like we've done for 200 years. This isn't anything new. And we also hope that in that executive order that is being drafted now, that we will be doing paper ballot hand count. That would be lovely to get these fraudulent voting machines out of play. So we'll have to wait to see what's in it, but I can confirm for the first time live on the Karis Project with your host, Dale Richardson. You heard it. Remember, you heard it first on the Karis Project. There is an executive order currently being drafted, and it is gauged to be out and signed in September. It has been confirmed. I have talked to people that actually are in the West Wing. I am not at liberty to drop names, nor will I. But your viewers should be very happy because this rig is about to take some really hard gut punches, okay? The cheaters are about to take some punches to the grill. I'm sorry.
I'm fine with that. Criminals getting caught for doing this, I'm okay.
And you know what? It sure took long enough, though, because we see that you showed that article earlier in the episode about the Department of Justice has just come out saying, now we're going to start charging election officials. It's not going to be, don't do that anymore. We're actually going to file charges. Well, that is good news. And the fact that there's an executive order coming out in September on election integrity, combined with what we already saw released on July 4th, I think this is going to have some real teeth behind it. I really do. And my also hope is whatever is in it, there has to be enforcement mechanisms. In other words, you can all day long say, you got to do this, you got to do, there has to be enforcement mechanisms. Dale.
Yes. Yeah, we're run up on time here. So just quickly tell people how they can reach you, and then I'm going to close here with a prayer because we got about a minute left.
Sure, absolutely. I do a weekly series on X called John Goodman Comments. And my X address is obviously x.com/@JohnGoo77697793. I'll say it again, @JohnGoo77697793. 800-7769-7793. And you're going to really like the content because no propaganda, no spin, only facts. And actually, just 30 more seconds, Dale. I've actually done episodes where I have been hard on the Republicans. For instance, we don't understand why over the last 5 years, no senator, congressman's talking about how to fix this fraud. It's amazing. So I did an episode recently called The Republican Media Missing in Action. So you're going to get fair content, honest, researched, not just biased stuff that's a spin and not worth a hoot. So come to my website on X. You will learn something, you'll know it's factual, and you will enjoy it. And I want to just say I'm very grateful to come on this show, Dale. This is a quality show, and I'm happy to be able to break this news again. You can take it to the bank. An executive order will be coming out in September on election integrity, and tell your friends and tell them that you heard it first on the Karis Project. Make sure you tell them that so they start watching this show because this is a quality show.
All right. Thank you for coming. And I'm going to close here with a prayer because we're going to need some of that because I know it's going to be a rough ride through the summer. All right. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love, grace, and mercy. We thank you for the hope that you have given us this day. And Father, I ask of you this day to bring the men and the women to come together, the ones that are standing up for doing what is right, to rebuild our families, our churches, our community, our nation, that we could have some protection for the children who need it the most, is my prayer. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you guys all for coming, and we will see you again the next time. And thank you, John, for coming. Until next time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Dale. Thank you.